all the different family members in the Bidens that received money. Okay, so here you have it just on the screen for you here. You have Hunter's ex-wife, you have Beau Biden's widow, you have Hunter's current wife, and then the brother of the Bidens as well. So with this information that the divorce lawyers knew about the payment, does that add anything to this story in your mind?
Well, it adds a great deal. I mean, the only people not on that list are groups like the pets, and Major's not mentioned, but otherwise every generation seemed to get a dividend. And what this looks like is a family business. It looks like a family business that is dividing up the proceeds. The difference is that this family business had dozens of LLCs and accounts that seemed designed to hide these payments. There's no cognizable reason why you would create this labyrinth of LLCs and accounts unless you were trying to hide the trail. And the other problem is that it's not clear what the family business is other than politics. And many of us have said for years that the Biden family is notorious for influence peddling. And this seems to confirm our worst expectations.
In the meantime, you've got this other story that's going on right now, and that is what happened with this letter that was signed by 51 intel agents saying that the laptop was bogus. It came from Moscow as Russian disinformation. John Brennan apparently had a long interview yesterday, and Jim Jordan explained that last night on Jesse at 7 o'clock.
He set for a 4-hour interview, Jesse, and he further confirmed that this thing was all political. We expect public servants not to use their title to influence an election, and it was so political when it was all done.
So my guess is here we need to see a transcript, find out exactly what the question was and how he answered that.
Yeah, but the thing that people need to remember is that when the letter was issued just before the election, many of us had already flagged an interesting aspect of this laptop, which is that it was self-authenticating. There were other people who were recipients or senders of these emails. Not only that, American intelligence said fairly quickly they had no evidence of Russian intelligence involvement. And yet this letter was issued, and we now know from the person who organized it, that he says that the trigger was now Secretary of State Blinken, who was working for the campaign. So we're beginning to see a lot of these pieces fitting now as to how this letter came about, and it's not a pretty picture.
Jonathan, I wanted to ask you something because I learned that 21 people that these letter instigators reached out to declined to sign it. And yet the letter basically says, here's based on the collective judgment of these 51, this is Russian disinformation, without at the same time saying, and yet 21 said they declined to sign because for whatever reasons. So they never said that. And this was actually being done at Langley?
Yeah, and that was one of the more interesting aspects in the last 2 days of news coming out. There's a reference to a CIA employee who may have played a role as a facilitator of the letter. That's very troubling because it indicates that somebody who's being paid by the American people may have played a role in giving what was called a talking point to then candidate Joe Biden. And when Biden used this letter, he never mentioned that his campaign had pushed this letter or was involved. Another recent allegation is that the campaign helped determine who in the media would first get the letter. So these are all levels of involvement that we really weren't aware of earlier.